enabled document, which could then be used for other purposes within the state, and they felt that was an important component of that driver's license.
So let me tease that out a little bit. So you talk about biometrics, you talk about RFID. It begins to sound a lot like the HSPD 12 card that federal employees are going to be carrying around soon. Is that where we're going?
We have a rational number of cards used for a rational number of purposes. Right now, the department, as I'm told, has the mandate to issue roughly 20 different forms of identity. I happen to, from the day I walked into the department, believe that's a nutsy situation that we have to address.
What does that sound like to you, Ari?
Not necessarily a concern. I mean, if a state wants to go forward and really try and get the privacy and security right, using a smart card, using the HSPD 12, the FIPS 201 standard from NIST, in order to do that, we'd encourage that, but it would really have to meet strong privacy and strong security guidelines.
For folks in the Baltimore to DC area.
But you can count at a minimum by the end of 2009 of having of people who go in and get their new driver's license having to wait in line at least one time to do it. You're going to have to, once again, anew, show your citizenship papers or your legal papers, and that's going to hold up lines a little bit. So at the implementation of this, it's going to be a little bit clumsy and a little longer lines than we would have had otherwise. But that's the price we pay, you know, if we're going to fight terrorism and comply with the 9/11 reports.
I think that the basic outline of that renewal process, which is that you will have to reappear in person and validate who you are every 16 years, is a pretty liberal standard. And I don't see that as being something that we tighten down to every 2 years you have to go back in again.
Sure. I mean, it's not a national ID because they're all a little bit separate and they're all going to be used a little bit differently. But there are minimum standards.
And that's the hot button, I think. One of the hot buttons politically is a national ID card. What's the sense of your colleagues in Congress? Do they see this as having that potential?
Well, you know, when I came to Congress 13 years ago, national ID, all of the privacy groups, everybody was against it. I think it's evolved where public opinion now recognizes there needs to be some form of identification. But this will be, a driver's license will be an identification you can use almost anywhere.
Well, it's one driver, one record.
Right.
You know, that type of thing, and the states can share that. And that'll cut down, way down on the fraud and multiple driver's license from one person getting multiple driver's license across the country. Basically, as the states adopt this, and we start to see these minimum standards come into place that the Congressman was talking about, those things come into place, the states actually will start to see other benefits in the fact that they can use this real ID for other features within their state. I think people are missing the point that there are some initial startup costs of any project that is undertaken. But as technology advances, the costs go down. As we start to see the features come into play, a lot of it might be legacy that's already there, resident. It's just a matter of bringing that in and leveraging the vehicles that the state already has to other types of technologies.
We're hoping it can be done in a way that's decentralized. I mean, we have technology today that we didn't have in the past where you can really create a decentralized database rather than having to go through a central source.
Right now, there's no plans for a centralized metadata type database held at DHS or anything like that. In fact, there is a number of checks that are done today. You know, are you wanted? Have you had a speeding ticket? Things like that. Those checks are already underway.
There's some people that still say that we need a centralized pointer where we have a centralized system of centralized record for everyone involved. We don't think that that's technologically the case at this point, that states can bounce off each other and share information with each other without going through a centralized system held at the federal government.
But at the end of the day, nothing in the rule, nothing in the final plan, and nothing we're headed towards will build a centralized database.
The nice thing about this is that the control of this is still at the states. There is a major cultural change that's going to have to be undertaken, awareness out there to each of the states, because basically the DMVs and AMFA and the people that sponsor this, basically the whole purpose of driver's license is for safety of the highways. And so now what we're asking them to do is to take a little tweak to that and say, let's keep that as a core purpose of the driver's license. However, we need to have these processes in the background here to double check and to do other things to validate and to verify.
The driver's license for safety on the roads has begun to be accepted across America for a lot of other things, whether it's renting a car or a truck and driver's licenses have been used as a weapon for a terrorist. You tie those two things together, the federal government has an absolute requirement, as pointed out by the 911 Commission, to get involved and set the minimum standards so that when that document is used, you are who you say you are, and it's a valid identification of you.
At the end of the day, I think, and maybe we can wrap up a fascinating conversation with this, I think it's a great example of what the American people and even people in this region sometimes don't see, which is the best of the private sector coming together with the public sector for a critical need of the country. And that is increasingly how we are going to meet the national security and other needs of the country, the best of the private with the public sector.
Well, I mean, we go to the private sector because big government is just very inefficient because of the rules we create. The reality is, in big government, we spend so much money making sure nobody can steal anything, and you can't do much anything else either. It just becomes easier to outsource a lot of these, which are not part of government's main business core anyway. So we're going to continue to see this, and the private sector continues to be very innovative.
With that, thank you all very much for a great conversation.